Hey folks, Alan Saunders. Welcome to another episode of Draft Talk on Pittsburgh Sports Live. I'm joined as always by Nick Farabaugh, SteelersNow.com, and Nick and I have been talking every weekday leading up to the 2021 NFL Draft, and we're going to continue that today by talking about wide receiver, which is not a position that the Steelers have a serious need at after bringing Juju Smith-Schuster back on a somewhat unlikely 1 year, $8 million contract with some voidable seasons in there. But it is a position that the Steelers are pretty good at drafting and have given a lot of late round draft capital to over the years. And given the fact that Smith-Schuster and slot receiver James Washington are both entering the final year of their contract, I think would be pretty surprising if they don't make at least one selection of wide receiver in this upcoming draft. I think the big question is, how early will they go to that position? Nick, I don't see it being a day one or a day two pick, pretty obviously, but really, I think starting in that fourth round, wide receiver becomes kind of open game for the Steelers.
Yeah, I mean, they've shown interest in multiple receivers. Obviously, that's the only reason they really went to Auburn's pro day, I think, was to see Schwartz and Seth Williams. Other than that, there's really no one there. Jamie Sherwood maybe, but he's a day three guy too. So you kind of look at what they need, and they could use a guy on the boundary. If Juju leaves, they could use a slot guy. They could use a shifty slot guy. If Ray isn't back next year, he's also in the final year of his deal, I believe.
He'll be a restricted free agent. The other guys will be unrestricted, but yeah.
So, yeah, you have three of the five receivers, and then Deontay Johnson, his drop issues. Obviously, he's been very up and down. I don't know. Maybe they want to get someone in that lane to have they don't really have a backup Deontay. Like, that's one of the issues I thought with the Steelers was they don't really have a guy that if Deontay Johnson goes down and gets hurt, they don't really have a guy that can come in, beat press coverage, and comfortably back him up. And I thought maybe that's where they would attack this year. Perhaps in a guy that can be a little bit shiftier, have a bit more ability after the catch, because really the only guy that has it right now is Deontay Johnson. And there's a little bit in Claypool's game, but Juju's more of a grinded out grinder after the catch, and Washington doesn't have a ton of ability there. So, I mean, it's a day three need. Round four is possible with an Anthony Schwartz. I think round six with a Tamorian Terry. Someone like that, I think, could definitely be a possibility for the Steelers on day three.
Yeah, I mean, is there anybody that you could see, I think there's a couple guys that I really like that are in that kind of second and third round area that could maybe fall into a position where the Steelers would want to use one of those picks on them. But to me, they just have too many needs if they stay where they are. But we've talked a lot about the Steelers trading back from that pick at number 24. If they trade back and add another, say, second or third round pick, does that open up wide receiver for one of those spots?
It could. Now, obviously, we know that they have to address running back and center in probably the first two rounds. I think that's what it's kind of working towards. But that fourth pick and the third pick, I think after round 1 and 2, because I think we all kind of expect that to be probably right now, if the board falls how it's expected, it's going to be running back in the center. Now, that could change, obviously, but that's what it looks like. So round 3, if they get another third, for example, that could be any position. That could be a tight end. That could be a tackle. That could be a linebacker. That could be an edge. That could be a safety, a corner. I mean, that could be a receiver. Absolutely. I think it could be, because that gives you capital to draft a guy maybe like an Amari Rodgers, where, he's a slot option, a shiftier slot option. He was linked to the Steelers a lot before they signed Juju back. They went to his pro day. They saw him live. That gives you that option to absolutely look and get one of those shiftier slot guys. I think there was a mock that had Jalen Darden going to them in round 4. That's an option. One of the maybe Kadarius Toney or Rondale Moore.
Kadarius Toney, I think, is a really good fit for that kind of sort of another Deontay Johnson mold kind of guy.
I'll tell you another guy, Dwayne Eskridge from Western Michigan. He fits the Steelers mold. He's 24, but it would be a round 3 pick. I could also see them taking a shot on a guy like Nico Collins from Michigan. I think he would be a very interesting choice. It's a talented receiver class. per usual. This is a very deep class, so they can find quality talent down into day 3. But yeah, they could take a guy, an Elijah Moore, an Amon-Ra St. Brown, De'Ami Brown, someone like that. If they have that extra pick, there's no doubt that they have options if they want them.
Now, if they go the day 3 route, there's some guys I saw down at the Senior Bowl that I thought really stood out, and there's been some guys that I've seen, just from covering college football. There's just so many good wide receivers. Like, we saw Tutu Atwell, and you cover Pitt as well at Louisville. I think he's a really solid player. You mentioned Dwayne Eskridge, another MAC receiver, would not be out of the question. I thought Shi Smith from South Carolina looked good at the Senior Bowl. I was really, really impressed by Frank Darby from Arizona State. Another kind of player in that, like Antonio Brown, Deontay Johnson mold, and a huge personality on him as well that I think is something that the Steelers tend to gravitate to. Daz Newsome from North Carolina, Trayvon Grimes. I mean, there's just so many guys that I can see fitting into what the Steelers need, because if you consider this need to be mostly for beyond 2021 and looking at 2022 and going forward, yeah, I mean, they'll figure to have a Chase Claypool, they'll figure to have a Deontay Johnson, and but they don't have the sort of a diverse pool of receivers at that point that, that pretty much everybody is on the board as someone that could be a potential fit.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, now I would expect one of those receivers, being Juju or Washington or Ray to be back in 2023 or 2022, mind you. It's probably going to end up being Juju. I think he's a lifetime Steeler at this point. I think he came back to try and get that done because the Steelers are going to have more cap next year. So that could obviously change the outlook. But I think when you kind of look, even if they just have Juju, Deontay Johnson, and Chase Claypool, they have a lot of depth needs at that position. They don't have a Claypool on the roster. Like, they don't have a speedy weight speed guy. Now that could be a Tamorian Terry. That's why I think he's very interesting. So if Claypool goes down, they could have a guy like Terry who's got so much upside into his game. I mean, he could legitimately be DK Metcalf light if he works out and he commits to it. But that's going to question if he can pan up. The Steelers are one of the best at developing their receivers. But they can obviously also use in that Matt Canada scheme with the jet sweeps, using their receivers like running backs. They could use one of those shifty or running back-esque guys, like a Rondale Moore, like a Dwayne Eskridge, like a Jalen Darden, someone like that, like an Anthony Schwartz. We've seen Matt Canada use guys like Quadri Henderson in that mold. So certainly that's possible. And then they could obviously, it's not out of the question that they could use someone like Juju, who is, maybe not the fastest guy. They're fast enough, but they're physical and they set the tone. And I think that is also a possibility for the Steelers. They can go any direction, really. I mean, they just don't have a diverse pool, because I don't think Ray McLeod, what we saw from him last year, I don't think he's a serious receiver. Like, he feels more like a quasi running back. And I mean, there's a place for that. Maybe he gets more shots in the backfield, I think, this year. But he's a return man, running back, receiver type. He's not really a true receiver. So I think they need someone there.
Yeah, I think it's a position that, if they do take a pick on something that they consider a luxury, position that doesn't have an immediate 2021 need, I think that's a position where they should feel really good about their ability to get some future returns, because they've been so good at drafting wide receivers. I mean, it is really almost impossible to think about the success they've had at drafting wide receivers, not just early in the draft. In fact, they haven't really done it early in the draft, but it's been Claypool in the second round, Johnson in the third round, Juju in the second round. Even guys that, going back further, Martavius Bryant was a 4th round pick. AB was a 6th round pick. Emmanuel Sanders was a 3rd round pick. They've gotten so much production out of those later round guys, and they haven't all been hits. There've been some misses in there. They missed on, I guess you call Marcus Wheaton a bit of a miss. That they missed on some other guys in there, but really, I mean, their production from drafting wide receivers has been better than just about anybody in the league.
Yeah, there's not many that evaluate the position better. They do it. The more impressive thing is that a lot of teams will just study a type and have a type of receiver, or a type of corner, or a type of something, and draft that really well. But when they deviate off that, they aren't very good at drafting the position. The Steelers have drafted all types of receivers and have done it well. They've done the speedy guy in Mike Wallace. They've done the shifty yak guys like AB and Deontay. They've done the more physical guys with Juju. You know, they've done all of that. They've gotten the height, weight, speed hit in Claypool and Bryant. I mean, they've drafted all different types of receivers. And even going back further, you know, Colbert drafted Plexico Burris and Santonio Holmes, and obviously those were first rounders, but those were hits. I mean, he's hit on most guys. The few misses are like Sammy Coates and I don't consider Dre Archer a receiver, so I don't think that's a miss in the receiver category. But Limas Swede's obviously the biggest one that they missed on. But outside of him, you kind of look at that 2 to 3, 4 range. They haven't missed on many. And even Marcus Wheaton, who was a miss, he was at least decently productive during his time in Pittsburgh, and he was a fine slot receiver. So, you know, I think you at the very least,
Yeah, 1,500 yards and 8 touchdowns. I mean, not too many teams are listing that as one of their worst third-round receiver picks.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in Coates, and who knows if Sammy Coates doesn't destroy his hands. I mean, literally, his hands were broken pretty much. His whole fingers were messed up. Remember, he had that stretch with Ben where he was dynamite for a few weeks. Who knows what happens if he doesn't just screw up his hands completely. So that could change completely as well. But you kind of know the Steelers, when they draft a receiver, everyone goes, well, there's the next receiver. And lo and behold, the Steelers, I didn't even like Chase Claypool coming out of Notre Dame. I think you remember this last year. We liked the fit, but I thought he was a reach. No, he was not. They hit that. Again, people call Deontay Johnson a reach. A few outlets liked him, like PFF, but a lot of people didn't have him that high. That was a hit. They snagged Juju, who was a projected potential first rounder, down at 260. I mean, that was a big hit for them as well. So, you know, if they draft someone in round 3, it's probably going to be a hit. we just kind of know it. Yeah, at this point, next Steelers receiver is up, and even James Washington, he's been maybe not second round good, but he's been a very solid 3 for the Steelers for a very long time. If he's your 4th wide receiver, which he is right now, I think you're very happy with your receiver core.
I think in general, there's a bit of a, how good is the Steelers receivers room with Juju back? And, and we kind of talked about, him crossing that position off as an immediate need. But I mean, I think it's a bit underrated as to how good the Steelers are 1 through 4 compared to the rest of the NFL at that position.
Yeah, they're fantastic 1 through 4. Now, the one issue with 1 through 4 is the only guy that can beat press coverage is Deontay Johnson. And with Ben's style of play right now, you need your guys to be able to beat press. And this is why I think if they open up that third with another third, maybe they get a guy that can play on the outside and beat some press coverage, because that was the one thing I thought they lacked. Because Deontay Johnson, when he beats press, and he got benched in that Bills game because of his consistent drop issues, but he was the only dude that was toasting guys because they just pressed him. Now, Claypool is very young and I think can improve upon that, but that Juju's never been a guy to beat press, really. He's been a guy that more just like bodies his way through it. James Washington's kind of the same way. So maybe they want a quick separator. That's kind of the only weakness of this receiving core. I mean, everyone else, I don't know if they have a true one in that group, but it's a group of Deontay's a 2, Juju's a very good 2. Washington's a very good 3, and Claypool's already a good 2. And I think Claypool has the opportunity this year, if he can beat press coverage and clean that up a little bit. I think Claypool has an opportunity to become that one that the Steelers have been looking for. I think he legitimately has so much upside to his game. He hasn't even unlocked yet. So if he can take that leap and just start running a little bit sharper routes, beat press coverage, and he's been working on that this offseason, I think Chase Claypool has the opportunity to be an absolute superstar. So, yes, I like this. I like this receiving core a lot compared to what the NFL has right now. You just look; it's probably a top 5 unit.
And I think maybe of anything else, the one position Steelers fans, especially Steelers fans that want them to trade back, should be hoping falls down that board. It's wide receiver, because there are a lot of wide receiver hungry teams. And if the Steelers are looking for trade back opportunities, I think a wide receiver falling to them. Look, we've talked about the Steelers having a lot of needs. That is the one position where, like, yeah, they have a bit of a future need, but man, they're solid 1 through 4 right now, and could really, I think, get into a situation where if wide receiver turns out to be the ignored position early in the first round, get a good haul for moving back a few spots, to let somebody come up and take a player that maybe should be a top 15 pick there at 24. I think that opportunity might be there for the Steelers, and is one of the ways that the draft could really fall into their favor. Either way, we're going to keep on keeping on as we get into some of these positions that maybe aren't the top needs of the team as we get close to the draft, but are guys to be looked for on the third day especially. We're going to talk guard, we're going to talk defensive line, and also whatever else that you have on your mind. So leave a comment. We'll get to it in a later show, I promise. And we've got just a handful of these leading up to the first round of the NFL draft next Thursday. So make sure you check out all of these shows going back here on the YouTube channel, Pittsburgh Sports Live, and check out all of our Steelers and draft coverage at SteelersNow.com. For Nick Farabaugh, I'm Alan Saunders. Thanks for watching. This has been Draft Talk on Pittsburgh Sports Live.